All right, so are you ready to dive into some really interesting stuff? We've got all these articles about Bitcoin and how it's reacting to the U.S. election. Trump just won a second term, and Bitcoin is going absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So we're going to unpack what this surge means, what experts are predicting, and why it matters to you.
Yeah, so what's really interesting here is that Bitcoin hit a new all-time high.
Wow.
Almost $77,000 right after the election results came in.
Right.
But the really interesting thing here is that analysts were predicting this surge before we even knew who won.
Oh, wow, that's wild. So it's not just like a yay Trump pump. What were they seeing that made them so confident?
It seems to be like a growing confidence in Bitcoin as an asset class, independent of political leanings. It suggests that people are starting to view Bitcoin as like a valuable investment in its own right, regardless of who's in the White House.
Okay, so it's bigger than just one election.
Right.
But some of those pre-election predictions were pretty bold, right? What
Yeah.
kind of numbers are we talking about?
Some analysts are really, really bullish.
Okay.
Tom Lee from Fundstrat believes Bitcoin could reach $100,000 by the end of this year.
Wow.
And go even higher in 2025.
Okay.
Bernstein is even more optimistic, predicting $200,000 by 2025, citing factors like U.S. debt and a loose monetary policy driving people towards alternative assets.
Wow, those are some serious numbers. So even if you're just mildly curious about Bitcoin, this is something you should be paying attention to.
Absolutely, and there's another layer to this story.
Okay.
Trump's win is being viewed as particularly good news for Bitcoin.
Yeah, that seems to be the general consensus. Didn't Trump even post something about the Bitcoin white paper on X right before the election?
Yeah.
On Halloween of all days?
He did. It definitely added to the pre-election excitement.
Yeah.
But his overall stance on Bitcoin during the campaign was very pro-crypto. He even promised to appoint a crypto-friendly SEC chair.
Right.
Potentially Hester Pierce, according to Coinbase's CEO Brian Armstrong. And get this. He talked about creating a national Bitcoin reserve and supporting U.S.-based Bitcoin mining.
So he's putting some serious weight behind his words. What would those actions actually do for Bitcoin in the real world?
Well, if he follows through,
Yeah.
it could have a massive impact.
Okay.
More favorable regulations could boost Bitcoin's legitimacy and attract institutional investors. Think big players like pension funds and hedge funds who have been hesitant to enter the crypto market until now,
Right.
and a U.S. Bitcoin reserve.
Yeah.
That would send a powerful signal globally, potentially leading to a wave of mainstream adoption.
It almost sounds like the U.S. wants to position itself as the leader of the Bitcoin world.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And that raises some interesting questions.
Yeah.
Could this shift global financial power dynamics? Could it even lead to a new kind of digital dollar race?
Wow.
It's definitely a possibility.
This is all pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But is everyone on board with this? I feel like there has to be some pushback somewhere.
And you're right. Not everyone is celebrating.
No.
Some analysts are urging caution, suggesting that while the long-term outlook for Bitcoin might be positive, there could be some bumps in the road.
Right.
Bernstein, for example, predicts a potential dip to $50,000 before things really take off.
Okay, so a little reality check.
Right.
Even with all this positive momentum, Bitcoin is still a volatile asset.
Absolutely.
And there are risks involved.
It's not a guaranteed ticket to riches.
Right.
It's important to stay informed, do your research, and make investment decisions carefully.
Right.
Never invest more than you can afford to lose.
That's some solid advice.
Yeah.
So we've got this surge happening,
Right.
a pro-Bitcoin president, and predictions of both massive growth and potential dips.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And it gets even more interesting when you look at who Trump has surrounded himself with.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Who are the key players in this pro-Bitcoin movement within the U.S. government?
Well, we're seeing a lot of familiar faces who have been vocal Bitcoin supporters for a while now.
Yeah.
People like Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy,
Uh-huh.
RFK Jr., even J.D. Vance, and he actually owns Bitcoin himself.
Wait, seriously? So it's not just a Trump thing.
Right.
It's like a whole wave of pro-Bitcoin sentiment sweeping through different parts of the government.
That's right. And we're seeing it in the Senate, too.
Okay.
Remember Senator Cynthia Lummis?
Yeah.
She made that big announcement about the U.S. potentially building a strategic Bitcoin reserve under the Trump administration that really put this idea on the map.
Yeah.
And then you have pro-Bitcoin candidates winning key Senate seats, like Bernie Moreno, who flipped a long-held Democrat seat in Ohio, and Ted Cruz securing another term in Texas.
Yeah.
These aren't just isolated incidents, it's a trend.
Okay, so this shift in how Bitcoin is perceived and how it might be regulated, it sounds like this could have some pretty big long-term consequences.
Absolutely. This isn't just about the price of Bitcoin today. It's about the potential for fundamental changes in the financial system and how we think about money.
This is all pretty mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
But even with all this excitement, I'm guessing not everyone is popping champagne.
Right.
What are some of the concerns people have about this whole situation?
You're right. Not everyone is convinced.
Okay.
One big concern is the potential for increased volatility in the market. Bitcoin is still a relatively new and untested asset.
Right.
Its price can swing wildly.
Yeah.
And even with these positive predictions, there's no guarantee it will continue to rise.
So even though Bitcoin is gaining traction, it's still a bit of a roller coaster ride.
Exactly. And those price swings can have real consequences for people who have invested heavily in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies.
So what else are people worried about? Is it just the volatility?
Volatility is a big one,
Yeah.
but there are other concerns as well.
Yeah.
Some people are worried about the potential for regulatory overreach. While many crypto enthusiasts are happy about Trump's pro-Bitcoin stance, others are wary of the government getting too involved.
Interesting. So some people actually see government support as a potential threat to Bitcoin. I wouldn't have expected that.
It's a complex issue.
Yeah.
Clear and sensible regulations could be beneficial, bringing more stability and legitimacy to the crypto market.
Right.
That could attract more institutional investors and make people feel more comfortable participating.
Yeah, I can see how that would make sense.
Right.
But too much regulation could stifle innovation and limit the potential of this technology.
Exactly. And that's what some people fear.
Okay.
They worry that excessive government involvement could end up controlling or even suppressing Bitcoin instead of fostering its growth.
So the delicate balance.
Yeah.
What other potential downsides are people talking about?
Well, there's also the issue of security. Bitcoin as a decentralized digital currency relies on a complex network of computers and cryptography. This makes it very secure in many ways.
Right.
But it also makes it vulnerable to certain types of attacks.
Like hacking.
Exactly.
Right.
And as Bitcoin becomes more valuable and more widely used, it becomes a bigger target for hackers and cybercriminals.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So as Bitcoin gains more mainstream acceptance, the stakes get higher and the risks become more significant.
You got it.
Okay.
And then there's the environmental impact, which is a growing concern.
Right.
Bitcoin mining, the process of creating new Bitcoins requires a massive amount of computing power.
And computing power means energy consumption, right?
Right. And that energy often comes from fossil fuels, which contribute to climate change. As Bitcoin mining operations grow in scale, so does their carbon footprint.
Right.
Some people are concerned that a Bitcoin boom could have a negative impact on the environment.
Okay, so there's definitely more to this than just the price of Bitcoin.
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground here. The potential upsides, the potential downsides. But what does this all mean for the average person who isn't a tech expert or a Wall Street investor? What's the takeaway for them?
Yeah, it feels like we've gone down so many rabbit holes we've talked about. Record highs, potential dips, government regulations, the environmental impact. Where does the average person even begin to make sense of all this?
It's definitely a lot to process.
Yeah.
But I think the main takeaway here is that Bitcoin and the world of crypto are no longer something we can ignore.
Right.
It's a powerful force that's already reshaping the financial landscape, and its influence is only going to grow in the coming years.
So whether you're a seasoned investor, just curious, or even skeptical, this is something you need to understand.
Exactly. And what's particularly interesting right now is that we're seeing several factors converge.
Okay.
You have Bitcoin's price surging to new heights, driven by things like increased adoption and growing institutional interest. At the same time, you have a pro-Bitcoin president who's surrounded by advisors pushing for a more crypto-friendly environment.
Right. And then you have this global economic landscape that's becoming more and more uncertain, with people looking for alternative assets to protect their wealth.
So it's like All the stars are aligning for Bitcoin right now.
It certainly seems that way, but that doesn't mean it's all smooth sailing.
Right.
There's still risks involved.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a volatile asset, and its price can fluctuate wildly.
Yeah.
There's also the potential for regulatory overreach, security breaches, and those environmental concerns we talked about.
Right. It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Exactly. But even with those risks, the potential upside is enormous.
Okay.
Bitcoin has the power to disrupt traditional financial systems, empower individuals, and create new opportunities for wealth creation.
So where does that leave us? What should our listeners be doing with all this information?
The most important thing is to be informed.
Okay.
Do your research, understand the risks and rewards, and make decisions that are right for you.
Right.
Don't just blindly follow the hype, but don't be afraid to explore this new world either.
I love that don't be afraid to explore.
Yeah.
That's what this show is all about, right?
Exactly.
Diving deep into complex topics, uncovering hidden insights, and helping our listeners make sense of a rapidly changing world.
You got it. And this whole Bitcoin situation is a perfect example of that.
Right.
It's complex, it's multifaceted, and you can't sum it up in a few sound bites.
Right.
But by taking the time to understand it, we can open ourselves up to new possibilities and make more informed decisions about our own financial futures.
This has been a wild ride. We started with this election and Bitcoin's crazy price surge. And we ended up talking about everything from global financial power dynamics to the environmental impact of mining.
It really has been.
It feels like we've only scratched the surface.
We definitely have, but that's the beauty of it, isn't it? There's always more to learn, more to explore. This story is far from over, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground and hopefully given you some food for thought.
Thanks for joining us. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep asking questions.
Until next time, stay curious.